Welcome to Civil Action. I'm Sean Kernick, and I'm joined by my partner, Brian Kabatek. Say hello, Brian.
Hello, Brian.
We're a couple of lawyers, and today we're going to talk about how Trump and the Trump administration is basically threatening to ruin the practice of law as we know it as two practicing lawyers. Our podcast is called Civil Action. We cover the intersection of law and politics and how one shapes the other in either direction. So let's get right into it, Brian. What do you think, big picture, everything that the Trump administration is doing, both in and out of the courts, how that impacts our day-to-day practice?
Well, I think there's a couple of things here worth kind of unpacking, as they say. One is I'm very concerned that the actions of the Trump administration are giving people that participate in the justice system, whether it's criminal or civil, whether it's lawyers or parties who appear pro se or pro per, meaning they represent themselves, whether it's giving them license to be rude, to be offensive, to attack judges inside and outside the court. That's the first issue. And the second issue is really what I think is what we're going to continue to see in this country since Justice Clarence Thomas became a Supreme Court justice in the early 90s. The selection of judges and the confirmation process in the Senate had become more and more and more politicized all the time, both in the selection process and in the Judiciary and the Senate approval, the appointment process, the approval process that those bodies, the Senate has to approve appointments to courts, which are really the district court, that's the trial level court, the Court of Appeals, and ultimately the United States Supreme Court. So those are, I think, the two issues worthy of discussion today. Sean, take it away.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think there's two branches here. What this type of rhetoric and action is doing to civility and how it really threatens it and jeopardizes it. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's so important. And the other branch here to talk about is how politicizing all of it, the whole selection process, and politicizing judges effectively, and why that's a threat to democracy and our whole system. In the first bucket there, we appear in courts, we litigate. That's what we do. That's our job all day. That's what we do. And I think the system only works if the participants in it, and I'm not talking about the litigants. I'm not talking about the person one suing person two. I'm talking about the lawyers that are participating, the boots on the ground that are actually doing the work where the rubber meets the road, the judge, the parties, the lawyers in the case. When they don't respect each other, when there's no civility in that process, I think it all falls apart. And I think
this has been fueled by the Trump administration, that it's okay to be rude. It's okay to be offensive. It's okay to be aggressive. And it is not. And if you look back at the Trump criminal trial in New York, that was exactly what happened. He would come out of court. He would insult the judge. He would say rude things. And I think that this gives people, whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, I think it gives lawyers the feeling that they can attack the judges. They can get, vitriolic in court. They can yell and scream. And I'm here to tell you, it's a terrible idea. And it's terrible to see it happen to the justice system. And I think it's almost given license, particularly to younger lawyers, Sean. No disrespect to you and your younger generation of lawyers. I mean, you've been out long anymore, but you're not that young anymore, as Bruce Springsteen would say. But you are, you're almost 15 years out of law school at this point. Young lawyers coming out today, they don't know any different. I can speak from personal experience that when the internet became, the main method of communication, and texting became the main method of communication, it was a lot easier for people to be keyboard warriors, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I see that every day, and I got to, I think, see that transition because I've been practicing for 12, 13 years now. And I got to kind of see, I was in on the tail end where, I was obviously around when internet existed and was a method of communication, but there was still at least letters and things like that were being sent. And now you can almost exclusively run your practice without ever having to send a letter in your life. And I've seen that. And I think the attitude that we've seen coming from the White House, coming from the top down, it gives people license to act that way. It gives people license to go after the lawyer on the other side, personal attacks. And you gave examples of Trump going after judges, calling them, leftist lunatics. And,
I've given those in the past. That's right. But I think that, look, clients have a reasonable expectation that you're going to fight very hard for your clients. And that's what we do. I mean, I'm not talking about this isn't a sales pitch for us. I'm saying good lawyers fight for their client. They fight for their client. But they know where the line's drawn, right?
Yeah.
A good lawyer knows where the line's drawn. A good lawyer knows, not to make this personal. There's one saying we have in the law, which is if you can't win on the law, win on the facts. If you can't win on the facts, win on the law. If you can't win on either, go after the other lawyer.
That's right.
And of course, it's a joke. You don't.
Yeah. I'm not agreeing. I'm not saying that it sounded like I said, that's right. That's what you got to do. No, but that's what we say. We kind of make fun of lawyers that engage in personal attacks by referencing that, go after the last resort is go after the lawyers. And that's nonsense. You shouldn't do that. And we shouldn't allow others to do it. We shouldn't create a system that fosters that kind of attitude.
No, but I think this is where this starts happening. And we're seeing it more and more today is lawyers who won't shut up, lawyers who keep arguing past the point of no return, lawyers who are willing to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, right? Things like that over and over again. Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly where this is going to ultimately go.
Right. Yeah. I don't know where this goes. I mean, but I think the reason it's so important is, and maybe we talk a little bit about how our system works, but the respect is so important because, like I said, if these parties don't have that civility, they don't have that mutual respect, I mean, it's a slippery slope. The whole thing just falls apart. If you're not respecting what the other side has asked for, if you're engaging in personal attacks against the other side instead of fighting the legal merits, because then it calls into question the merits of the case.
I think the Trump administration is making it okay to do this.
Yeah. I agree.
For certain lawyers out there, particularly younger, impressionable lawyers, it's making it okay to do this. So it's going to hurt the judicial system. It's going to hurt the client. Now let's pivot for a minute and talk about the other issue, which is this is adding fuel to the fire of the politicization of the selection of judges, right?
Yeah. I mean, so let's talk a little bit about, Article 3, at least on the federal level, right? We can talk about the state level as well, but on the federal level, judges are appointed pursuant to Article 3 of the Constitution, and it's a lifetime appointment. What does that mean?
What does lifetime mean to you?
Well, it means your whole life, right? It means, and they usually step down, obviously, before they are unable to work, but some say some hang around longer than they should. But it's a lifetime appointment, and the executive nominates it. The president literally nominates someone, and then they are confirmed with the advice and consent of the Senate. And it should not be a political process. The vetting of it, the Senate confirmation process should be just an attempt, in theory, to confirm that these are impartial, unbiased, and they're fit to do the job. And with the job, by the way, which requires them to be impartial and unbiased.
Well, it really, to be fair, it really started. I think it started at the Supreme Court level with Justice Thomas in the early 90s.
Yeah,
but it really started during the Clinton administration, when a judge who happens to live down the street from me named Margaret Morrow was nominated. And she was one of the first judges who went through just horrific confirmation process to become a district court judge, a trial court, the lowest level trial judge in Article 3 in the court. And it continues. And I mean, today some judges sail through, but the more political this becomes, the more that this becomes focused. And I don't know if there's a way to get out of this. Can you think of any way to get out of this cycle that we're in?
No, that's why I called it a slippery slope, because it can't be undone. It's kind of hard to undo this, right? Is there going to be a swing where everyone decides, oh, we're now going to be civil? There's going to be a trend towards civility. I mean, there should be, but I don't know how you do this, because, when the pendulum swings the other way, you're going to want the other side. If Trump's been doing this on his side, the left's going to want the same on their side too. Yeah. If they're going to go through a politicization of the judicial confirmation process. So I don't know what you do. I don't know how you fix this.
Yeah, well, it's getting worse. That's the problem. It's getting worse, and judges have a job to do. They're an important part of our judicial system, and we need judges. And look, I've said this before: judges are human. Judges make mistakes. We understand that they make mistakes. What we don't accept is that there is checks and balances on the judges, and there's every single district court in the United States, and there are many district courts. Like, for example, let's say California. California has 4, right? Eastern, Northern, Central, and Southern. 4 districts. Each one has a number of federal judges appointed in that district, and each district judge is under the umbrella of a particular circuit court of appeals. And in California, it's the 9th, but in Indiana, I believe it's the 7th. You go around the country, there's different courts of appeal, and they are the reviewing court. So that's a check and balance. And then the Supreme Court, who only takes a very small number of cases, is the ultimate check or balance on the judicial system. It's not a perfect system. Judges make mistakes. Judges get the rulings wrong, and it happens, frequently.
Yeah, but it only works if you respect it, if you respect the integrity of the process. And by going after the judges, by going after lawyers too, because he doesn't just go after judges. He's gone after attorney generals that he hasn't appointed, or even ones he's appointed when they turn against him. He goes after them. All of that calls into, question the credibility of the whole system, and it undermines the whole process. And in a weird way, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but it's kind of like a sacred process. You have to respect it. You have to honor it, and you have to, bad decision. It's a bad decision. You take it. You're bound by it, and you don't like it. You go to the court there's channels. And then ultimately, if you lose at the Supreme Court level, that's it. You're done. Or if the Supreme Court doesn't review the decision, you're done, and you have to respect it. And that's the only way our system works.
We have an imperfect but an excellent judicial system. Yeah. And we have a system that generally works. But my last comment on this, and think about this, is that there is a fear factor. Whether Trump's successful in these attacks on the judiciary, whether Trump's successful in getting decisions overturned, there is an ultimate fear factor here, which is, I don't care how long it takes, how much money it costs. I'm going to, if you don't agree with me and you decide to challenge my actions, I'm going to drag it out. I'm going to attack the judges. People know that they're under attack. And at its core, the fear factor does have an effect. I can't measure it. I don't know exactly what it is, but it has an effect.
Yeah.
Your final thought, Chuck.
I think, tying into that, I think those effects are going to be long lasting. It's going to trickle down into future generations. You're going to have, whether it's lawyers or judges or people that would be lawyers or judges, avoiding going down some of these career paths, right? And then you have Trump trying to weaponize things like the Department of Justice. You're not going to have you're going to miss out on a whole swath of competent lawyers that would have otherwise worked for the Department of Justice, then gone on to be great practitioners or judges. A lot of people are going to look at it and go, these offices have all been politicized. They've been weaponized by a political party, by the leader of a political party. I'm not going to work for them, whereas otherwise they would have worked for them because they're supposed to be sort of objective bodies. And people are going to work for them. We're going to have a shortage of good lawyers in certain practice areas that would otherwise have come from there. Good judges that have the background requisite to be a judge. And it's going to have long-lasting generational effects on lawyers and judges and our whole system. And I think it's just really sad. And, as lawyers, I think we need to be aware of this so we can counteract the effects of it.
Well, I'll let you have a final word, Sean. So let me just sign off by saying thank you for listening. Civil Action, Brian Kabatek, Sean Karnikian. Always look forward to your comments, your questions, your issues. You want us to talk about something in particular, let us know. We're happy to do it. And thank you again.
See you next time.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.